All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Old Army Road Sidewalks Community Engagement Session. I am Dylan Pine, and I have the privilege of serving as president of the Edgemont Community Council. For those who are not familiar with the Edgemont Community Council, we are the leading advocacy and civic engagement organization here in Edgemont. We maintain relationships with our partners in government at the town, county, state, federal level, school district, fire district, advocating for issues impacting Edgemont's quality of life. And then we also support community programs and community organizations that develop a sense of belonging and a sense of neighborhoodness here in Edgemont. I'm really excited to have this evening representatives from the Town of Greenburgh, from BNL, and from AKRF to share with the community a little bit more about the Old Army Road TAP grant sidewalk project that the ECC has been working with the Town of Greenburgh on for probably close to 2-3 years now. So thank you for being here this evening. I'm looking forward to hearing from the community, and I will pass it off to the Commissioner of Community Development, Garrett Duquesne.
Thank you, Dylan. Thanks everyone for being here tonight. Dylan, we really appreciate you assisting, coordinating this meeting. So we're here tonight. Glad to be a part of the Old Army Road Sidewalk project. I want to note that I'm joined by Commissioner Richard Fahn of Department of Public Works, and it was indicated BNL, that's Barton and LaJudas. They're the town's transportation engineer that's designing the project. They're assisted by Elaine Dew of AKRF, who's also a part of the project team. And thank you, Terrence, for your film duties tonight. So this is the 5th of 6 federal aid projects. That means federally funded projects. And I've been a part of all of them with the Town of Greenburgh. This is the first of the 6 that were actually on a local road. The other 5 were on New York State roadways. Just a quick status update. 2 of those projects are implemented, Central Avenue and Hillside Avenue. The 3rd, Dobbs Ferry Road, will be complete in May of this year. And we've got East and West Hartsdale Avenue, which is the 4th project. That's a large sidewalk project as well. This is the 5th, and then the 6th is Knollwood Road in the Town of Greenburgh. One couple notes. What you're going to hear tonight is a design that's not complete. This night will be a success if we hear your local experiences, and that's going to help our designers to really tailor this project to be as much of a success as we all know it will be. So we will have a question and answer portion at the end of the night, and we do want to hear from your experiences. So with that said, Pete has a presentation for us all, and thank you again for being here.
Thanks, Garrett. So like Garrett said, got a presentation here. It's a handful of slides. We're gonna try to go through it somewhat quick just so we can get to some of the public input from you all. So project team, Garrett kind of touched on a little bit here, but our town supervisor, Paul Feiner, is the responsible local official. But with the federal money, you kind of have to define who's the top of the chain. So it's the supervisor. You know, from there, the project manager's Garrett, and then we're also engaging a number of different organizations within the town or groups within the town, and also the public. Just this past week, we met with the fire chief of Greenville, kind of picked his brain a little bit on a few locations. We'll kind of go over those as well, and also with the school district. Next week, we have a meeting with the county. Ardsley Road is a county road, so we're engaging them concerning some drainage and just connection of sidewalk into that infrastructure down there. So the design team, myself, Pete Cristiano, Tom Baird, we're from Barton and LaJudas. Elaine Dew from AKRF is our transportation subconsultant. We also had Civil Tech doing detailed ground survey and right-of-way boundary research. Maybe you noticed them out here last year. I think it was the summertime, roughly. Also in-house, we have our right-of-way subconsultant, or our right-of-way consultant, who's with BNL. So responsibilities on BNL's end is basically from start to end, design, engaging the public, so preliminary design, detailed design, if there's any need for right-of-way acquisitions, kind of going through that process following the rules and regulations for that, and then eventually construction support and administration. So project objectives. Number one, enhance public safety. We've walked it a few times. I'm sure you've all walked it. Speeds are pretty high out there. Sidewalks or pathways are pretty narrow, maybe non-compliant to ADA standards. So that's number one. There's a lot of adjacent infrastructure nearby, schools, commercial development on Central Park Ave. How can we better connect this corridor to those? And then traffic calming. That's a major one. Like I said, we were out there tonight, kind of see what the lights look like. It's pretty dark out there. Cars are going by pretty fast, kind of not really paying too much attention to the pedestrians. So that's a goal for the project as well. Project limits, roughly 387 Old Army Road. You can kind of see it in the arrow on the upper hand part of the slide. Ardsley Road's the southern end. And our scope, like I said, is making a continuous ADA compliant sidewalk from the northern terminus to the southern terminus. In between, there's a signalized intersection, and also at Ardsley Road, there's a signalized intersection. So anything we can do to improve ped accommodations there. Crosswalks, high visibility crosswalks, signals, sorry, signage, signals, things like that. So a little bit more of a close-up. The two schools, obviously we're at the one right now. Sealy is on the right-hand side of the screen. So how can we connect for future is another part. So we're putting sidewalk along this corridor, but in the future the town would presumably expand upon that and connect to other developments. For this project, there's Transportation Alternative Program funding, so TAP. So the town went after this opportunity a few years ago with the help of AKRF, got the money for design, any right-of-way acquisitions that are necessary, and ultimately construction, and then the mandatory construction inspection that comes with that. So that's an 80-20 split. So 80% is the federal share, 20% is the local match. So roughly $4.8 million was the total project funding for this. The town share is just under $1 million. With that funding, there's strings attached. So on the bottom half of the slide, so we have to make sure we follow the rules and regulations that are, like I said, that are tied with that money. So we have to follow the NEPA process, SEEKR, State Environmental Quality Review Act. And with that, make sure we're looking at, are we impacting any threatened endangered species? Are there any cultural resources that need to be accommodated or protected? And also the public involvement portion of this. So we're not local, B&L is not local, but we love to get the input of the local people who live it every single day, experience it more than what we can see. So those are major components that are required as part of the design approval process. So all of that's packaged up into a report, submitted to the New York State DOT. It's reviewed, goes to the Federal Highway Administration, kind of get their blessing before we move on to the next step, which is ultimately designing the project corridor. So some existing conditions, like I said, you all live it out there every day. There's a decent amount of vehicles that pass through every day, a little over 3,200. Vehicle speeds are elevated. It's posted at 25. We measured it at 35. You see more people, maybe some people going higher than that, some going lower, but our design is based on the 85th percentile speed, how wide the lane should be, shoulders, and so on. As you know, there's narrow shoulders out there now, and you can see in the picture it's a foot, 2 foot, sometimes it's down to 6 inches, not really conducive for bicycling or pedestrian access and so on. Also in that same picture, the walkways have varying conditions. asphalt, some concrete, maybe not so much in some areas or others, cracked, undulating. Another existing condition we looked at, our team, AKRF, looked at the crashes out there, whether they involve pedestrians, bikes, cars, and came back, it's the crash rate at intersections, specifically the signalized intersection, is 5 times higher than the statewide average for similar facilities. So it's definitely something to account for in our design. Motorist confusion, limited sight distance, all of that kind of coupled together are things that we look at. So existing section, roughly 10-foot wide travel lanes, 1 in each direction. Shoulders are very narrow. Like I said, 1 foot, 2 foot, or less in some spots. So what we looked at, kind of take all of that information together, use our design standards from New York State DOT, kind of come up with something that could work within this corridor. So this project doesn't really involve full depth reconstruction, widening of travel lanes, nothing like that. It's just sidewalk. So what can we do? How can we fit that within this particular corridor? So it's fairly straightforward. We want to make sidewalks ADA compliant. 5 foot is our goal. We can go a little narrower than that when there's constrictions, whether it's right away or something that's not movable. Could be a rock outcropping, could be utility poles, but most of the time we try to remove and relocate those utility poles. But that's kind of our window. So basically we're holding the white edge line that's there and trying to fit in that sidewalk within this space. So on the left-hand side of the screen is roughly the section, the section that we have shown is roughly going to fit within the map that we show on the left-hand side, which is number 1. So we feel like we can fit that in pretty much that entire length. So to the next slide, like I touched on a little bit before, there are areas where there are some constraints where we may have to drop down to 4 feet. That's still ADA compliant, but we want to try to limit that where possible. If we do drop down to 4 feet, we can only go certain lengths before we need to have passing spaces. If for some reason there's someone with a wheelchair or 2 people with wheelchairs crossing, they need to have a spot where they can go around each other. So those areas will be limited, but there probably will be a need for them out here. So the next section between Ardsley and roughly the top of the hill is a little different. There's an existing gutter there right now. Stormwater flows down the hill. We still want to be able to accommodate that. So we're going to try to keep the same rough section that's out there now, but 5 foot wide sidewalk, concrete gutter that's going to channelize our stormwater, and then we're going to collect that. Right now, there's nothing really collecting it at the bottom of the hill at Ardsley. It's concentrated flow right out onto the road, so we're going to attempt to collect that with underground drainage and then pipe that into the county system. So we'll discuss that with them in our upcoming meeting. So another section or another kind of rough view. The yellow is roughly where we're going to show the sidewalk. So it's not really that complicated of a project, but we got a couple sections and views to kind of show a few other areas that we're going to kind of focus on. So like I said, at Ardsley Road right now, you could see in the picture on the left-hand side, there isn't a crosswalk that goes to Ardsley. Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know if it'll show up.
Yeah, probably not. Oop, wrong one, sorry.
So this does not exist.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, so that doesn't exist right now. We know there's a decent amount of people that walk to the train station. And the only real way to do that now is to kind of take a long way around using the crosswalks, but human nature, people probably don't do that. I know when we were out there, my coworker and I, we cut right across there. It's an all ped phase, so vehicles are stopped, but there's no curb ramps, there's no crosswalk striping, so that's one component right at this intersection that would be addressed.
That is a county road, so it's one of the reasons we're talking to them about that, make sure it's okay.
In addition to the drainage as well. Right now, stormwater comes down. Like I said earlier, it's concentrated at the end of that gutter and just flows onto Ardsley. So we want to collect it, convey it into an underground system that is then piped into the existing county drainage. So moving up towards Henry Street, there's a couple things going on here, as you probably all know. There's an existing set of stairs that is not ADA compliant. Probably more troublesome to remove snow when that is happening like now. So as part of this project and or part of a separate town project would be the removal of those stairs and shifting the sidewalk away from that alignment right now, closer to the existing curb line, following the profile of the road.
And the town is going to be working on it. Garrett, you want to say a couple words about that ahead of this project?
Yes, sure. So you can see the design. What it does is it tapers the sidewalk. So Old Army Road here, it tapers the sidewalk into.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yes, so the design tapers the sidewalk tight to the road there, and then it would come around. So that would be represented here. And Commissioner of Public Works has indicated that based on the volume of calls we've received for this, we're taking a hard look at accomplishing that this summer. So we're going to keep you posted on that. And if that's done, it would be done outside of this project.
One thing with that, Pete talked about the federal money and the state reviews and all that. As you might imagine, that takes quite a bit of time. Things don't always come back very quickly. They'll go out and it takes a long time for that review. So the project, the whole project will not be constructed this summer, but the town understanding the need for this situation here is going to get it done earlier outside of that window for this project because it is an important aspect of this. So we'll be using that funding in another location on the project to improve something else while that's done quickly, because we're really tied by that federal process of a long time period. It's just normal. It's what they do. So just a little background on that.
And currently, this intersection is stop controlled. It would remain stop controlled as part of this project. As I'm sure you've all seen, there's an existing stop sign with flashing LEDs around it. We anticipate that staying or enhancing the opposite side, potentially a raised crosswalk at this location. It is stop controlled, but the raised crosswalk would help slow vehicles down that are rolling through it. Just another treatment in our bag that we can use to help make people more compliant.
Nobody rolls through the stop sign there, right? Nobody in this room, right?
So moving up to Glenwood, a wide expansive pavement area here. One thought is to help reduce the length of the crosswalk, so where people would be exposed to vehicles. It is a stop controlled intersection on the minor approach of Glenwood, but the less time people are exposed to vehicles, the better. So one thought is to have bump outs where you move the curb out a little bit, still accommodating turning vehicles, garbage trucks, school buses, delivery vehicles, and so on. So we have turning movement programs that actually model those movements to make sure that they can still be accommodated before shovels get in the ground and it's actually constructed. So that's one potential improvement here. There's existing retaining walls also in the location. You can see on the picture roughly. There's a fair number of retaining walls like that in the corridor that we want to avoid. We don't really want to touch those. They add great character to the corridor, and they're pretty expensive to replace and so on. So keep that where they are and kind of work out from there to make sure we have our ADA compliant pedestrian elements.
Just wanted to also mention that would be an opportunity to pick up additional green space. It's modest, but all this pavement could be landscaping, mulched, and it could look nice.
So the plans that we have shown on the right-hand side are, like Garrett mentioned earlier, are preliminary. It's part of the process to go through. It's something that we've looked at, something that potentially could work in this scenario that ultimately will go as part of our design approval package to the New York State DOT. And, we are expecting to get comments from you all and, then modify what we have before we ultimately submit it to them. But we have to start somewhere. So that's kind of what we got. Shifting down to White Oak Lane, currently signalized intersection, pedestrian push buttons, crosswalk striping. The push buttons work. A lot of times in communities they don't work. They're there, and maybe over the years they haven't been maintained or whatever, but these are actually functional. We tested them out last week. As part of this location, the sidewalk would shift from one side of the road to the other, but as I'll show in another slide, which isn't shown on this particular view, was something that we just discussed with the town recently about extending the sidewalk from White Oak Lane to Thomas on the opposite side of the street. So it would be two parallel ribbons of sidewalk from White Oak to Thomas, rather than have a mid-block crossing at Thomas, which adds other elements of safety that if we can avoid, we'd like to. We'd like to have people cross at the crosswalk under, the signalized intersection with push buttons and so on. So this kind of is another view of that. It's real rough, just sidewalk on both sides, curb face, 5 foot wide sidewalks. So another example, this is just shifting a little bit farther down. Actually, this is right in that area between Thomas and White Oak. So like I mentioned earlier, try to keep those retaining walls where they are and work off from there. There's I think in this particular view, it shows a stump that would be removed. Utility poles, if those are in the way, we would move those within the highway boundary. If those can't be moved easily, then we would go around them, narrowing the sidewalk to 4 feet at the minimum.
One of the reasons too,
sometimes we go around those utility poles is because we're on curves here, and when the utility company has to move one pole, it usually means they have to move 6. And it is on their dime, but that also takes out a lot of the tree canopy when they do that. So shifting poles around do have a lot of after effects, and we try to avoid that as much as possible. Also, Con Edison doesn't always get the work done as quickly as we'd like, and sometimes can put delays into the project unnecessarily just for a few feet. So it's a balancing act that we do with that. So we've got a number of projects where we're trying to avoid the poles to be moved, and the municipality insisted they would be moved, and they did a lot of tree cutting, and they weren't happy about that, and it just kind of steamrolls from there. So I know the trees are extremely important in this corridor to everybody. So we're cognizant of that. The town is cognizant of that, and we're going to try to minimize that as much as possible. So that's where somewhere that utility stuff comes in. Things you don't really notice when you're driving by, but that's what happens.
So there are some locations where we're not able to maintain some of the features. This is one location that it's pretty tight. This is, I think, close to Mount Joy. the retaining wall does project out into the town's highway boundary. It would be something tough to maintain. So we're looking at ways to potentially avoid this, but it's an example of something that if it is in the way and we can't shift the road, we can't narrow the sidewalk any narrower than 4 feet. It's something that would have to be modified. So tree stumps, retaining walls, there is a couple locations of exposed rock that we would have to hammer out. No blasting or anything crazy like that. We don't want to damage or do vibration monitoring and everything else that comes with that. But there are locations that have these constraints that we try to avoid, but if we can't, we have to modify. So like Tom mentioned, vegetation trimming. That I have on here is when we were walking out there, there's vegetation that brushes your shoulder. Things like that would be modified or trimmed to make it more conducive for people walking.
Does that mean that you would hammer out the ledge just north of Ardsley Road on the eastern side? What do you do with that? There's no 4-foot sidewalk space there.
Correct, yeah. We were originally thinking of avoiding that and having almost a bump out into the travel lane to avoid that. And then when we were out here last week, I think it's going to be a combination of both. It looks like it's been previously removed for the pedestrian signal that's there now. But we do know that just beyond that rock, there's an existing stone retaining wall, and then it's very steep. So we don't really want to get into changing the whole character of that hillside, and because it has right-of-way constraints, cost constraints, and so on. So it's going to be a little bit of both. I think removing some of it, but also shifting the curb line a little bit, so that way we can get our sidewalk element in there. Just another example. If we have right-of-way on the backside of this existing path and we can't move a utility pole, that's one requirement one, I guess, rule that Federal Highway Administration won't allow us to do. We can't acquire property to move utilities. So in this case, we would either modify the positioning of the road a little bit or narrow the sidewalk.
Yeah, one of the constraints here is the steep slope behind here also. You start widening there, you start chasing that down the hill, and that's just a vegetation disturbance and property easements and things like that. So we're looking to try to avoid that as part of the design.
So our schedule, we're almost to the end. So we're in the preliminary design phase right now. Like I mentioned earlier, we have our ground survey. We've done a preliminary layout. We're engaging the public, you all, to kind of get our feedback on some thoughts. We're looking to have design approval, meaning addressing public comments, refining the preliminary design, completing our environmental, completing our design report, submitting that to the DOT for review, addressing the DOT comments roughly in the next couple months, so April 2026. Once we have design approval, then we could begin final design, meaning we're putting together a package that a contractor could then essentially go out and build. While we're doing that development of the design package, if there's any right-of-way acquisitions that are needed, that process would begin at this time as well. For this corridor, any acquisitions are looking at permanent easements or temporary acquisitions that aren't, we're not taking anybody's house, we're not taking significant pieces of property or large pieces of property. It's minor strip takings. We know everyone's home is their castle, so we're cognizant of that too, that we're not just blanketly going out and big bad government coming in and taking property. So we're aware of that it's not something that we're out trying to do. From there, construction, late winter, early spring next year. We're showing February 2027 because there are bats in the area, and there are restrictions on when we could cut trees. Our preliminary look through the project corridor, there are some trees that need to be taken down. And the requirement for that is anything over 2 inches in diameter at this height has to be cut within a certain window of the year, a certain period, from November 1st to March 31st, if you have this certain type of bat in the area. So we know we have the bat here. Tree cutting can only take place during that window, so that's why we're showing construction starting in the winter time. It may seem foreign, why are we starting construction in the winter, but that's kind of where that date's coming from. And October 2027 is a rough target, but that's preliminary right now.
We don't think it'll take that long.
I don't think it will either, but since COVID, we've seen prices increase, we've seen labor shortages, we've seen a number of different things that make it harder for the contractor to get work done. So though the schedule sometimes gets pulled out a little bit, but we do our hardest to push them as much as possible. So it's kind of a rough window of what we're seeing right now. So with that, I know I kind of breezed through that pretty quick, but kind of open the floor up to some questions, and love to hear from all of you.
Yeah, I just want to make one more statement.
Sure.
There may be some of you that submitted a letter of support for the grant back when the town applied in 2023, or if anyone watching the recording submitted a letter of support, we really appreciate that. For this project, I think we received over 50 individual letters of support, and the grant reviewers really do take that into consideration. So thanks for anyone that did that support. And having said that, I will walk around with the microphone for any questions or comments. So
One thing too, Garrett, on that grant, that's a competitive grant. There are hundreds and hundreds of applications sent in for that grant money. And it's difficult. So kudos to the letters of support and the town for actually securing the grant, because a lot of local communities do not get that money. So it's a competitive process. So.
oh, yes, just one addition. We did not mention lighting. There are gaps in the lighting along the span of this sidewalk, so that will be rectified. All right, so any other questions, sir?
Microphone. Just a clarification, because you went over it quickly and it was a little hazy for me. This is a 4-foot wide, essentially in most places, poured concrete sidewalk with expansion cracks and a new concrete curb.
Correct, yeah.
5 feet.
Our goal is 5 wherever possible, and then where we have those constraints where
Which is a lot of places.
there are a lot, but we have some tools in our bag to make 5 work, and where it can't, then yeah, we'll go down to 4 foot. That is considered compliant, but we want to limit those places because I think there's only 225 feet is the maximum length you can have that without a passing space, so that where 2 wheelchairs could potentially pass each other. So we want to limit that, but yes.
If you don't need the mic, you just, if you would like it, we could bring it to you.
I think I'm okay. So I have so many questions, but a couple of them. One is building on that. How wide are they now? Because it seems like in some spots it's like 2 feet or something. So I'm kind of curious, like by Glenwood, how are you making that wide? Are you just filling where there's kind of grass on each side with cement, or how that works? That's one question.
That would be yes to that one. Yes.
Yeah, so you're just
Mhm.
Thomas Lane, that area. What's between Thomas and Central Avenue now, and where we were talking, I think, about building up one part further up. So maybe I'll just pause with that question for now.
So what's between Thomas and Central Ave right now?
Is it like only on the school side that goes down the hill, or you said something about crossing, so I'm not sure what's there right now.
From Thomas to, White Oak, it's on the east side of the road, but as part of this project, we would have it on both sides. And then from White Oak to Central Park Ave, it is only on the west side, I believe.
Non-school side. So on,
Yeah.
yes, right now between Thomas and White Oak Lane, there's nothing. That gap would be filled with the new sidewalk as described.
The southern part of Thomas.
Then from White Oak to where it picks up close to Central, that will be replaced. The footpath will be replaced. The crossover, the major distinction point of the project, the crossover at White Oak Lane to the school side on Old Army, it's from there all the way to Ardsley Road that there will be a continuous run.
So at one point, you're gonna have sidewalk on both sides, but not for most of it.
Yes.
Correct.
That's simply a function of funding. In a perfect world, Old Army Road is the nature of that corridor. A sidewalk would be great on both sides. Unfortunately, we essentially maxed out the amount of money that the town could apply for the grant. And there's other sidewalks that aspire to build in Edgemont and throughout the town. So unfortunately, it fell victim to not having $7 million or $8 million budget. And the paths, we replicated where the historic walking paths have been, and typically people go where it's convenient, and that's where these footpaths have really evolved. So that's generally been followed, but we're able to piece together a little bit more with that section from Thomas, because we recognize that it's very unlikely that someone's going to walk all the way around to Edgemont Circle to double back. And then also one thing we also failed to mention in the presentation, at White Oak Lane, from White Oak Lane towards the school, there's about, I don't know, maybe 250 foot section. That's going to be improved as well. That's of poor quality, I would say. And that's part of this project as well. Yes, sir.
Hi. I live on Thomas Lane, so I really welcome these changes. That would be amazing. Even though my kids are older now, I have one in college, one in the high school. But we used to walk the kids to Sealy, and we'd have to look both ways and run across Old Army to get to the sidewalk on the other side. So for the future, that's a great idea. I really like that second sidewalk. And the raised crosswalks are a great idea. To slow these people down. I mean, my wife and I walked our dog at night for 7 years, and we've seen people speeding, I'm not exaggerating, 50, 60 miles an hour, and going right through the stop sign at Henry Street like it wasn't there. So raised sidewalks at least, because I've been requesting speed bumps with the town for years.
Yeah,
There's this reason, there's that reason. According to code 12345, we can't have it between a corner and somebody's driveway. We can't have it around a turn, and it's this and it's that. Okay, but they put them on Pipeline, which is a straight road that nobody walks on, and all the children are on Old Army, and they don't want to put them on Old Army. So this is a big improvement. So congratulations. That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I realize funding is not infinite, and safety is of paramount importance as part of this project. I was just curious, didn't hear anything, because I live on the wrong side of Old Army. We do on the non-sidewalk side already. Is there anything that's going to be put in place that enables, families and children that, want to walk to school in either direction to do that more safely?
No.
I mean, my mother, when I moved in, said my child lived till 3 years
Yeah,
old. She's
unfortunately,
31,
on that
but,
side of the road, you will need to cross to the sidewalk. As Garrett had mentioned, the funding part, ideally, we would have it on both sides if it was possible. But it's just not, far as
So I
the cost is concerned.
think what would make sense is every intersection is going to have a crosswalk improvement. So what will make the most sense is for those that are on the other side is to identify which intersection's closest, as safe as you can get to that intersection, and cross at the intersection as opposed to crossing mid-block. Because generally
There's none by
that would be.
Glenwood.
I'm sorry?
No, but that's
There's no crosswalks near Glenwood. So children have a very long strip. I don't even know where down there, but to go to Sealy Place, they have to cross to the other side of the street. Thomas Lane, Edgemont, all that, they have to be on the other side. And at certain points around Glenwood, there's the curve that's blind, and as you said, people are driving too fast. You had data of people getting in accidents at traffic lights. I mean, it's scary to have your little kids supposing to like cross the street to go to the sidewalk. So, I mean, that's the same with the other side too. So I'm just kind of wondering, the speed bump is ideal, but like, are there ways to at least make a crosswalk somewhere that's not, they don't have to go all the way to Henry Street?
Because you're talking about
We'll have to look at it, and we're gonna have to look at the shoulder of the non-sidewalk side as well. Comment duly noted, I understand. We're
So
gonna have
like
to
by
look at it and
Glenwood,
back
if there was a crosswalk from
You'd
Glenwood
have
to
to be
the other
really
side.
careful,
Yeah, I
like
mean, that's
where
right.
it
Because
is.
there's
There's
that
a
turn, there's that turn.
But I think a lot of people who live there would be willing to, you know, I don't know, I can't speak for others, but like, people move here for the schools. So you'd think we'd be willing to sacrifice a little bit of space to keep our kids safer.
Because there's really no place to walk, and right now with the snow, I mean, and I don't have a child in school, but it's a danger.
Okay, so the non-sidewalk side of Old Army, definitely to look at ways to, if you had to use it, make it at least a little safer at a minimum, and direct to crosswalks and then more traffic calming. So that's all stuff that, please write that down in the comments, because you know, the grant, as it's told, said, was competitive, has a scope to it, a proposed amount of work that the state awards the project based on that criteria. And if we do other things outside of that original application, they want to know, well, is the public behind this? Did the public ask for this? And our answer is, yes, they did. Okay, you can do it. So that's where a lot of your comments really hold a lot of weight. And we really encourage you to write that stuff down, because we can use that to encourage, if it's feasible to do it, then that is a big part of that. So just something that may not have thought of.
We live on Doris Drive, which is actually on the map, and we get a lot of water overflow from Old Army, where above where we live, and I think you had a picture of it actually, the sidewalk is really low and water just pools there because there are not a lot of sewers there. So it jumps over and comes down to our property and has caused a lot of damage. So I'm wondering if that's going to get addressed, if there's going to be another sewer there. It's one of the pictures you have
Intersection
of the,
That
right
one,
there.
that was this.
So right there, the water pools and it jumps over.
So that right there
Yeah.
where you're
See how low
pointing,
that
that is
is?
the only drain on that 1,000+ foot stretch from Ardsley
To Doris Drive.
Doris Drive. There is one lone drain there,
Yeah.
and it gets overwhelmed. If it's like the town has to come by and clear it every time before it
And
rains.
they don't.
And if they don't remember, I go up there and clear it with my hands. Because if I don't, the water comes down onto my
Yeah,
property.
but even without that, it jumps over the curb and comes down onto the other side. And we have video, and so we're happy to also fill out this form. Send video. But yeah, it just pools right there, and then it jumps over
And
the
it happens
curb.
all the way down
You had
Doris.
said that you were
Yes.
exploring ways to, like, fix the drainage down when it gets to
By
Ardsley,
Ardsley.
so it doesn't just spill out there. But in terms of controlling and managing it before it gets there, are there plans to
Or
put
on
in
this
more
side.
drainage along the way? Or are you just gonna pipe it along the way that it is now?
We will improve the capacity of the drainage structures. There's limited drainage infrastructure that we can connect into. So we gotta be aware of that. We can't have an 18 or 24 inch diameter pipe flowing into a 12-inch pipe. So, we will certainly take note of this and see what we can do. Do you live right here, or are you in the street
We're
down?
on the street below.
So that little bump there, the sloppy driveway there,
Yep.
that was because when they constructed that house, water was just going through the broken sidewalk and flooding down onto my property. So after some
complaining, they put that in to try and
Keep it on the
water
road.
from-
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
okay.
but it doesn't really.
Yeah, it
And-
still goes over.
And all those houses on Old Army are on very steep slope property and are old houses, so they don't have dry wells or anything. So all the way down Old Army, all of that water ends up going down into the houses on Doris. So we all have pools, unintentional pools in our yard /
Okay.
basement.
You say it comes from the road?
Yeah,
Yes.
because it just pools right there.
No. It also comes from people's
The
gutters
and their lawns
that are
and everything.
then actually piped into our backyards. That's a whole other issue, but it is coming off of the road as well, because there's only one gutter in that whole road,
Yeah.
and it's at the top of a hill.
And look, I think that the broken sidewalk all the way down definitely doesn't help the situation. So I imagine that if you build that up, that will help. But it'd be great if it was kind of
Okay.
a little bit less loose and out of control.
On this topic, can you talk a bit about curb height? Because it seems like the higher the curb, the more it would help them. And the curbs get relatively lower over time as more pavement gets put on year after year. So what are your thoughts about curb height?
It's designed for 6-inch vertical face. I mean, over time, yeah, it could be paved over, but I guess I don't know, have to.
We don't do that anymore.
We don't.
Do you mill everything?
Okay.
So, yeah, everything now is milled, so it's back to the same reveal. It's called the 6-inch curb reveal. Yeah, back in even from the 90s and 80s, a lot of it was lay another layer of pavement on. Builds up before you know it, you got an inch there.
The most recent repaving of Old Army Road did not mill.
Because the manhole covers are dropped about 4 inches, and everybody's driving, trying
Right,
to
that was
avoid
that was a temporary situation.
Well, it's been a lot.
But
And it was done twice in the not too distant past.
Is the roadway going to be repaved after the sidewalks are repaired?
That's not as part of this project, but maybe
We would do that.
in the future. Okay.
You would do that?
After the project is done.
Yeah, the grant
Okay.
funding is a transportation alternatives program. So for walking and bicycling, and it will not cover asphalt overlays unless it is necessary to correct a pedestrian safety issue. We've managed to get funding for that in some cases. That's not going to really apply here. But the town is going to do some new paving. That's good because we have a couple of possible shifts we want to do for a few feet. That would be the final way to clean that up. So there will be paving. Yeah. Not part of this grant, but from the town.
I have a question. So you described it going from White Oaks Lane and then crossing over, but also continuing on the two sides down to Thomas Lane. But did you mean Edgemont Circle when you said that? Because it further to the west there would be Edgemont. It changes from Thomas Lane to Edgemont Circle. So I'm just trying to envision where.
The whole horseshoe would be filled in, if you will. So from Thomas Lane to Edgemont Circle.
Okay. So, and then at Edgemont Circle, what do? Do you do a crosswalk or you just stop there or?
It actually goes more towards Central until a point where on Central the sidewalk is what we would deem compliant. So it's roughly in that address. I think it was 387 or 187.
387.
Not far from Central. So
Okay, and on the other side, are you thinking of continuing to the school road or you'd stop before you got there? The school has an
You're
access to
paving
the back
into
athletic
Thomas.
field.
You're paving into Edgemont Circle.
The sidewalk would be on both sides from Thomas Lane right here to White Oak. So that's both sides, and then on one side, so I guess the left-hand side of the screen.
South side,
South side,
non-school side. That's existing.
all the way up.
that's existing, yes, to be
Yes.
replaced. Yeah. Nothing on the other side of that juncture.
The existing crossing that you mentioned here to the school, we are actually out there tonight kind of looking at that, potentially what we could do. There's site distance that we have to kind of check in on, make sure that if we do put a crossing there, that
It's so close to that light and people come through that light so fast that
Yep.
would just be dangerous.
Yep,
Honestly.
so it hasn't been ruled out yet, but it's definitely something that we gotta cross our Ts and dot our Is with. If it doesn't make sense, then we won't do it, but it's on our radar to look at further.
One other design element that I forgot to mention, because it's on the town's agenda as opposed to the grant, is the signal at White Oak Lane. It relies on loops in the ground, and if the vehicle doesn't pull up far enough, it doesn't trigger the loop, so it's recognized. That signal will evolve to a camera ahead, which will respond to traffic volumes and respond better, and essentially the loops will not be relied upon. So that's something we're also looking to implement, perhaps this year. So we're cognizant of the inefficiency of the loops system and the traffic that's out there.
I have a few topics, and that was one of them. So can this funding be helpful for improving that and making it a smart light? Because do you want us to write all these comments down?
Yes.
Do you want us to also say them? Like, does it matter if we say them or?
We're
like
taking
both.
notes as well.
We like both.
Both is great,
Yeah.
and we're gonna go back and review this afterwards, so that's why we're recording it, and, but yeah.
It would be great to hear what happens if that's a smart traffic light at the intersection of White Oak Lane and Old Army, because there's tremendous backup there at very specific and very predictable times of day. That can make a huge difference. Another question would be, can you do anything about signage for truck traffic? The reason we're all in here tonight is because a truck was heading towards the high school from Ardsley Road, and no commercial vehicle should be on this road. It was going so fast that at the turn going just past Glenwood, it took out a telephone pole right when kids were walking home from school. It was at the exact wrong time. And that telephone pole was just dangling like a toothpick on the wires like that. And I helped rally the community. We got 300 people involved in this process. And then Dylan took all this energy and brought it to Garrett, Paul Feiner, and everybody, and that's why we're here tonight. It's because that truck could have killed 5 kids at the same time. So it's hard for trucks to notice that they can't go on this road until it's too late. So maybe something can be done about that.
Okay.
I lived at 381, which you had just mentioned as the crossing to the access road for the Edgemont High School track maybe 5 minutes ago. And you're saying maybe it could be a crossing or not. So I'll describe it here because it's hard to put into comments. So having lived there for 5 years, when school is getting out, it's bumper to bumper back all the way up, where people are coming out of White Oak Lane down to Central Avenue, bumper to bumper. Kids are walking home to Central Avenue down from the high school track, and they will walk between the 2 cars that are parked, and it's very hard to see them. Cars are moving very quickly from Central Avenue towards the high school.
Yeah. Right.
So there's very little sight distance to notice a kid walking out from these cars. Putting kind of a don't block the box right there could be very helpful and increase visibility of those kids. Am I kind of making sense with that one?
Yep.
I've even seen cars that are so impatient to make the light going towards Central Avenue that for bumper to bumper traffic, they will get out in the opposite lane of traffic, and there's only 2 lanes. They will go against traffic, pulling around cars, maybe someone's on their phone, and right at that moment, if kids are walking out, they're not expecting someone coming towards Central Avenue the wrong lane.
The wrong lane,
so,
yeah.
So don't block the box could be really helpful there.
You're saying so they can get it to the left turn lane at Central? They
Yeah,
go in
it's
the
not
opposite
even
lane.
close,
Yeah.
but they're like 200, 300 feet away from the light, and they're going around traffic, especially if someone's on their phone not paying attention.
Yeah.
And we all know kids drive here because they're coming home from there. The next topic would be the Glenwood crossing. It's interesting, you'll see parents walk their kids all the way across the Glenwood crossing, and then they'll let them go to school, because that crossing is so dangerous. I can't verify, but I've heard that, I think in the 90s, there was a bicycle fatality at that intersection. I don't know if your data goes back that far, but your solution of making it easier to cross looks really good. Maybe consider an island in the middle because when Greenville parents are coming back from the high school, they're coming up Glenwood towards Old Army, and some are going to want to go right, some are going to want to go left. Traffic backs up a lot there. So your solution narrows it down to one lane, and it would significantly increase traffic if you can make it a Y split, maybe. That will reduce the traffic congestion at that intersection, and also make it easier for the kids. My kids used to walk that way to school. They can go to the island and then cross in 2 hops rather than 1, something to consider.
Okay.
The next one is Henry Street ramp. I think it's great. This is such a pain point. Everybody wants Henry Street fixed. My kids walk home on that exact intersection every day. And I personally have a concern about the proposed solution. I know it's very well intentioned, but maybe we can talk about it a little bit. Currently, the sidewalk is about 5 feet away from the road. But I think, did I see that it's going to be like really close to the road now in the proposed solution?
Yes.
Correct, yes.
And it's going to be much lower to the ground. And
Yes, it would basically follow the profile of the curb line that's there in an effort to avoid impacts to the fence, the trees, and more right-of-way involvement. But let's continue.
yeah, so this is lots of kids are safely walking to school from there. It's a fairly safe walk. It's a fairly safe area because you've got 5 feet and your kids are elevated. But if we put those kids, these kids, they're joking around sometimes, one step this way, that's that way, it makes it harder for an 8-year-old to walk to school if that sidewalk is going to be so close to Henry Street. If there's anything you can do to keep it away from that curb, because I've seen cars hit the curb as they're making that turn. It's a tight turn.
Okay.
You mean you want it still up in the air?
No, it doesn't have to be up in the air, but it should be you could lower it.
You should
And
go,
it just,
yeah.
it should just be further away from Henry.
Yeah, you should go look at it at pickup or drop off and see where the kids are standing and where the cars are. If you're crossing the street at that point, the last thing you want is a sidewalk closer to the road. You feel like every car is about 3 inches from you when you're walking there. So I recognize you don't want like this enormous ramp going up, but I don't think you want to move it closer to the curb anywhere near there because it totally puts the cars, it's a very, very tight intersection, puts the cars and the kids kind of right on top of each other. So
I got you.
I would just go during morning or afternoon and look at how the traffic and the people move, and you'll see what the easiest way would be to keep them separated. But it's definitely not.
One of the tools we have too is to provide a buffer between the road and the sidewalk. Maybe it's 2 feet, maybe it's 3 feet, but
It feels really good now to be 5 feet away. This one's really important. You were the professionals, but this one kind of had the hackles raised on me when I heard about it.
Understand the concern. I mean, ultimately, if you drop a hard retaining wall at the edge, straight down, you pick up all that space, you're excavating all of that. It's a big project, but we understand the concern. We're going to look at it.
Garrett, with the building materials, it's all the best. It's all concrete. Granted, it's not the great, beautiful stones we have to make the curbs, but it's what's practical in 2026. Is there a chance that you could conserve some costs in some areas by using asphalt for the walkway, not the curb, like had been done on Robin Hill Road recently by the town? Can we essentially use some of this money for additional pedestrian projects in Edgemont? And not just across, but in this specific corridor, so that it is approved by the federal government?
Yeah, I'll ask for no, not that it's a bad idea. New York State DOT will not allow it. While I indicated it's a federal grant, it's being administered by New York State DOT, and unless it's a shared use path that's
8 feet.
8 feet wide, yeah, it would not be allowed. Not a bad idea, but unfortunately, it's
Not allowed for asphalt specifically.
It has to be for concrete, for sidewalk, for the scope and the purpose that they define it as.
Okay.
So New York State DOT acts as an agent on behalf of the Federal Highway Administration, which acts on behalf of US DOT. So they answer to that realm, and then we're just down here at the bottom,
Great.
trying to get it built, so.
And then just re-emphasizing about curb height, because if you look at the highest point of Old Army Road, the curb is about 2 inches tall because it's been paved so many times. So if you could do this project kind of like once and for all, that make this curb so big that those speeding cars aren't gonna act. On 381, as I lived there for five years, one of these drag racing cars came off Central Avenue, and it was 11 o'clock at night, and it was a shocking sound. It was so loud. It sounded like an airplane was landing. It was unbelievable. They sped up from Central Avenue so quickly. I got a chance to talk to him because his car ended up on the sidewalk. And it's because the curb, he said he lost contact with the road because he was going so fast. He came up that hill so fast. So he got on the curb because the curb isn't very high. So higher curb can help protect
We're gonna
those
fix that.
kids.
And you can't have it too high because it's too high of a step for people stepping off, in case they trip. If they're walking along and they misstep, it's too steep over 6 inches. That's why we can't go over 6 unless it's a very special case. But it will be 6.
Will function as traffic calming. Psychologically, you're driving, you now recognize this truly is a space for pedestrians. There's 6-inch curb. It'll have an appearance of the road slimming down, so it'll really change the flavor and the character for the better of the corridor. I saw a hand. Yes, ma'am.
I think you alluded to it, but I was curious to hear more about lighting, because that is something that really helps. And in the winter, it's dark early too. So anything you can do to increase lighting, especially in the dark areas. I mean, we came out tonight and it's really dark, obviously at this time of night, but any enhanced light would really help visibility.
The gaps in lighting appear to be closer to Central and in the vicinity of White Oak Lane and Central. It seems where there tends to be more gaps, but the gaps are not exclusive to that. So the whole corridor is going to be comprehensively looked at from a lighting perspective. But we experienced the same thing that you just described. Sir, do you say something?
Sorry, I wanted to add to that. As part of the grant application, we were looking at a crossing to get you, I think it's the field entrance to the school, north of Edgemont Circle. We were looking at an enhanced crossing there, potentially a raised crosswalk or an RRFB. And at the same time, we recognize that that is one of the locations that is dark along this corridor. So at that location where we just walked this evening, we're proposing an additional light, and that was also something that was included as part of the grant application.
So because of that, we can include it under the project. So
Just a little caveat, because I saw a reaction, which is we have so much modern technology to make the lights not shine into the people's houses and things like that. Hopefully, or they would be well placed. Like, I would not want to sacrifice that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What technology is that?
They have ones the direction in which the lights go, how they.
Yeah, they shine in, they're much brighter than they used to be.
No, they used to use shields on the back of the high pressure sodium and the metal halide bulbs that they have just a simple metal shield, but now the LED style that would go in you can direct their focus to almost any pattern you want. It's amazing to see what can be done with that. So that's part of the design now. Those are the current lighting standards, so that will be followed. So.
On this picture, have you talked to the police department about the elevated crosswalk? Because it seems like a really good idea, but Jill and I have been discussing that with them for several years, and they had mentioned it's too close to a stop sign. Have they given any feedback yet about that concept? Because I think the community would strongly support it.
We're working with them, and there are ways around that if they apply, if we can get it approved. But part of the comments will really help with that, to suggest it. Okay, because there's motor vehicle traffic law that is sometimes it's a gray area. So I understand the police department's concern about that. They're valid with that point. But when other factors come in, such as the accident history, the traffic, the speed, the pedestrian, the type of pedestrian as well, all of that comes into a factor where we can make a case and have public support for that as part of the permanent record that I hope many of you will provide. Will really help with that too, and give the police department kind of a go-ahead to come out of that gray area with the project. As long as it's applicable and it works, because the engineering does have to dictate, so, on that.
So maybe there could be a process for the ECC to like gather a lot more community support. You'll let us know when we need to do that?
Yeah, go.
Okay.
Yeah, the comment forms here, we'll be collecting them for 3 weeks? 3 weeks?
I think it's a month.
A
I
month,
think what we
a
have,
month.
yeah.
So whatever thoughts you have, take the comment forms, they're over here. Make some notes, maybe not tonight, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, but get them all filled in. That becomes part of that report that Pete mentioned. That goes for review, and that the public comments are part of that report that make the case improve, become part of the permanent record. As you know, very procedural. It's different than the town going out and paving an area or fixing something. This is a very, very prescribed process with a lot of red tape. Been doing it for 35 years, so it gets to you after a while, but we'll get through it. But support's big. Support's
Got one
really
more
big.
question, but maybe somebody else has something they wanted to ask too?
I just have one more question. I don't know if there's, excuse me, if there's a plan to do any sort of barrier between street and like above the curb, like I don't know what they're called, like the whatever.
Guide rail.
Guardrails, exactly. The place that it would be most helpful, should that be a possibility, is, coming off this stop sign at this intersection, is a kind of turn to Roxbury. And the kids kind of walk up that street and then kind of turn, and all the people coming off the stop sign are accelerating. And so it's kind of just one of those points where I know I used to live on Walbrook Road, and I really didn't feel comfortable letting my kids walk up there because they just weren't paying quite enough attention, and the cars were really coming off. Now, part of it's that the curb's not that high there also, but it just, if you were ever going to put that any place, it felt like that place might be a place where it would help keep the people turning onto Roxbury, like making a big wide turn, which they need to do, and then also like keep the kids kind of from getting too close to the edge of the curb when they make that turn onto, because it's just because the cars are accelerating off that stop sign that it makes it kind of a wonky spot.
Okay, good.
It's an
Thank you.
excellent idea. That came up several years ago when we engaged the community about that exact intersection. And then, did you mention that some of this money might be able to be used for easements? Because there's something about the pedestrian network here. There used to be a lot of informal pathways between Thomas and Robin Hill Road. You're already making it easier now with the sidewalk that connects to Thomas. But it's really hard for anyone on Robin Hill Road in the Sealy Place School area to get to the high school. They have to go up to Old Army. But there used to be informal agreements between families where they could just walk through. If there is some funding available, or you're looking at how it's worth a discussion. This is not a slam dunk, but getting an easement between Thomas and Robin Hill Road, there could be a lot of support for that too.
Not as part of this project, unfortunately. This falls into not a bad idea, just cannot be utilized. The funding for this cannot be utilized to advance that initiative.
Okay, so it's not like a holistic, it's
Acquisitions to facilitate improvements within the project's limits.
Okay.
That's what the easements are, funding is combined to. Yes, sir?
So I've lived at 101 Old Army at the northwest corner of Owsley for almost 50 years. So I'm familiar with the history. I had 3 kids, all of whom walked to the schools, to Sealy, at the high school. I have to make a comment that isn't going to go over well, but I feel, and it isn't going to affect anything either, but I have to make it. I think that this is a gross misallocation of $4 million. There are many things in our culture, and I understand that it seems like it's free because the bulk of it is coming from the federal government, but it's not free. It's coming from our taxes one way or another. There are so many things that we could do with $4 million that aren't being done in our community and elsewhere in the world. It seems to me, my kids all walk to school, they never complained about the goat path. I watch every day as the kids come back on the goat path. The only problem is that they have to walk single file, which they do, and they can't chat with their friends the same way when they get in, at least when they pass me going down Owsley. That's not so terrible as I see it. There is a problem walking with strollers when you have little kids and you want to take them down there. on Old Army and take them over to Sealy or take them to the high school, that's a problem. I understand that. I have no issues with your proposed design or your proposed implementation, but it's sad to me that politics, the way it is, this is where the money goes when there's so many other things to go for.
All right. Any last comments? We're getting to think about the point where we're going to wrap up.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for your comments and for